everyone, and welcome back to AI Diatribe. I am your co-host, Matt Conweiser, along here with our host, Mr. Jason Lowe, who
Role
usually is the
reversal.
one that does these introductions for us, but today we decided to do something a little bit different because today Jason has no idea what we're going to talk about. So I figured this would be interesting because the last time we had an AI generate the questions for us as well as the opening or closing. And I'm trying to wonder, am I better than an AI at this? So, Jason,
Yes.
welcome back to your show.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to
It's
have you here.
wonderful. Yeah.
Now let me ask you something. You have become quite an internet phenom lately with your short videos. You've got
Oh, dear.
your dailies and your shorts going on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else, and you've got 20,000 subscribers now, and you've created a lot of arguments and fighting. But in all the times that I have been doing these with you, I haven't asked you something that I've always wanted to ask you. So I'm going to do it right here, live, quote unquote, on the air. And that is, why? What is your interest in AI and an AI diatribe? Why does it matter to you?
When I was 12 years old, my parents sent me, well, it might have even been younger than that. My parents sent me to a computer camp because I was good at math and because I was good with video games and the video game terminal that we had, the Atari and whatever else. Yeah, I was old enough. It was the original traditional Atari. And they thought that I might enjoy the computer camp. And boy, did I. It was eye-opening. It was earth-shaking. And that moment started my love for computers, for technology, big time. And we didn't actually buy a computer for our home until I was 14 years old. That would be 1984. For those of you that want to do the math, yes, I am 56 years young. But anyway, my dad bought an Apple IIc with ambitions of using it for bookkeeping and different things like that for the business. And I ended up taking over that darn thing. And I tried to teach him and show him how to do spreadsheets and stuff like that. And I love my dad. He's dad, wherever you are. I love you. But he was not incredibly technically proficient. And so he just wasn't able to figure out how to use that computer for anything related to the business. But I did take it and I was doing all sorts of crazy things with it. So technology has been in my blood since I was a little kid, for crying out loud, just like a lot of people our age, Matt. I mean, we're the video game generation, like the actual, oh my gosh, there's actual video games on the TV more than just the light up handheld video games, which by the way, were amazing. And I remember those as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain type of person, usually someone that's good at math, usually someone that has the ability to focus really hard, that really enjoys technology and science. And so that's my why. Now, as it relates specifically to artificial intelligence, dude, the stuff is freaking cool. I mean, come on. It's so powerful and it's so neat. And the use cases are so wide and varied. And the whole reason I'm doing the social media channel stuff, I mean, that's great and it's a lot of fun. And you're right. It's causing a lot of arguments and debate on my videos, the comments. I get thousands of comments on those things of people just fighting each other. It's just crazy. But the whole reason that I do it is awareness and try and let people know, look, this really cool technology, this is happening and this is what's happening. And setting up a little platform for, things where I can tell people what I think about artificial intelligence and the effect it's going to have on the world. And so we're in an exciting time. This is more revolutionary than the steam engine. This is more revolutionary than electricity. This is about as revolutionary as fire. Artificial intelligence, in my opinion, if it keeps going the way it's going, with the impact it's going to have on mankind, it will have that same kind of effect. It's pretty significant. And so who wouldn't want a front row seat to what's going on with artificial intelligence if they're even remotely technology oriented or technical in nature? So now we get to flip that question around. And Matt, other than the fact that we work so well together and we enjoy our conversations, and you're a smart son of a gun, and you're already in the technology industry working for IBM, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And you are a technologist. You tinker. You do things on your own at home, like I do, but you do it more than me because you don't sleep and you do a lot of really great things. And so I have to ask you, why are you co-hosting this podcast with me? What is it about artificial intelligence that captivates you?
So you actually, maybe without even realizing it, asked me two different questions, and I'm going to answer them differently. So you and I apparently had very different home experiences with our dads, and my dad also is passed away. but he was a tinkerer and he was a computer guy and he was a grease monkey. So before computers, he was elbow deep in a car's engine until it was time for him to go to bed. Like he built everything. He dug holes in his front lawn as like little foxholes and stuff, and his dad tripped in them and got really mad and punished all the kids. He was just constantly doing. And we had an Osborne 1 at our house in the late 70s, early 80s. And we're within a couple years of each other in age. And the Osborne 1, for anybody that doesn't know, is a 30-pound hard plastic cased computer called a luggable. And it's about maybe 26 to 28 inches tall, super, super wide, at least 20 inches wide, and about 9 or 10 inches high. And that gigantic thing weighed 30 pounds and had a 3.5-inch screen and a giant keyboard and two 5.25-inch floppy drives, no internal hard drive. And my dad wrote Space Invaders for it. So I played Space Invaders, and I had a database software so I could catalog my toys, and I wrote databases for it, and I printed them out on our dot matrix Okidata printer.
I had an
And
Okidata too. Those were great
yeah, I
printers.
mean, like anybody who can't appreciate what dot matrix is other than the Spaceballs reference is missing out on life, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in a computer forward, tech forward household. Like my dad and I were both heavily into it. And then of course I got into gaming and bulletin boards, and I used to host my own BBS that people would dial into on a modem, and we would trade stuff and just leave messages for each other. So I've always been that tech guy and that builder and that tinkerer. And I think that we all, in some degree, want to make our parents proud, follow in our parents' footsteps, or continue to be inspired by whatever path they set us on. But for me, it was also, I tend to in life lean into things that I feel like I have something I can contribute to, and shy away from things that, no matter how much I try, I don't feel like I'm adding uniqueness to whatever that is. And technology has always been one of those things I feel like I've added some sort of value in some way, shape, or form. So I've stuck with it. And AI is actually very different for me, because I think AI is allowing people, myself included, to add things to this world that they wouldn't have had the time or training to do otherwise. And I think that that's such a promise that AI is giving us as a community, if we choose to look at it that way. And if you've ever read any of my LinkedIn posts or my articles, I tend to be very cynical and very dark. I tend to be slanted almost against AI adoption. Just a wee
little.
bit,
Just
just
a
a
wee
wee
bit.
bit. Even though my PDoom score is right at 5, and it's still at 5. But I think, Jason, the answer is like AI is wild to me because of what it's capable of doing and how it's able to allow people with limited technical knowledge but broad industry or life experience to manifest things. And I know that can be good and bad, but if I'm looking at this purely as the silver linings, that to me is it. And I jumped into AI as a practitioner 10 years ago because in cybersecurity, it gave that to us, and it continues to give that to us. So it's meaningful.
So there's a lot of it for you that is altruistic. It's not necessarily because of an outright curiosity and an outright need to know. It just tends to be like you want to have a positive effect with your life in the technology space.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a great example. When I was working at a network and infrastructure company, I was one of the lead architects for that company for the healthcare systems in the area I supported. And a healthcare system had an infrastructure failure. And I was about 20 miles away, and I jumped in my car and I broke every speed law, well past statute of limitations now, by the way, just in case any of the state troopers are listening. But I broke every speed law to get to that hospital. And the only thing I could think of is, well, God, what happens if I get stopped? And my answer is, I'm on my way to the hospital. Like, there's an outage and I have to do this. And it made me realize that I mattered, that I could go to this hospital and I could restore services and get patients back into treatment rotations and help doctors interact with people and just help, just help. And so when I realized how good that made me feel, I tried to always pursue things that gave me that same feeling.
It's fair. That's a noble perspective. I wish I shared it. My reasons are just simply selfish, just because it's fun. Now, granted, the stuff I'm doing on the social media channels is a little bit altruistic in that I'm trying to educate the common man in a way that they can understand and to make them aware of a little bit more than just the headlines. And that seems to be going well. A lot of the feedback I get back on that is that it works in the way that I'm hoping to make it work. But that's probably the only altruistic thing there is, oh my gosh, this is interesting to me. I think I'll tell people about it. You know, that's about as altruistic as I tend to get with technology.
Yeah, but I would say that's enough. I mean, there are a lot of quote unquote influencers out there who are writing to write, who are following the algorithms to get the clicks, who are playing into the sensationalist headlines, regardless of what the underlying meaning is. And I think that your videos are balanced and neutral. And I think that's one of the reasons why you get so many conversations and people fighting, because it gives both sides of an argument room to be right and to be wrong. And there's enough room for the other side to fight the first side. And you just sit back and watch. So it's like you're just filling a room with kerosene and damp rags and a stove that's not lit but has the gas burner on, and then you just toss a match and see what happens. And not, obviously you don't do it intentionally to start a conflagration, but there's so many polarized people out there that when a neutral voice presents itself, I think number one, it's interesting and worth listening to, and number two, it provides a medium for both sides to fight each other because you're clearly not biased on one side or the other. So you create the ground for people to feel like they have a voice, and then they'll just fight with each other about it.
Well, I'm biased. I'm definitely biased. I just don't let it be seen. No, you're right. It's so interesting that we are in a time that is so polarized in so many ways. And I'm not just talking politically. I'm not just talking wealth distribution. I'm not just talking, positions on, climate change, global warming. Yes, I said it. I said the words global warming. So sue me. There's so many things where people are so incredibly and massively polarized, and artificial intelligence is the same damn thing. You get a whole lot of people that have a very, very deep P-doom score that no matter what you tell them, they look at it from the perspective of what damage is this going to do to humanity. And then you have a whole group of people that are looking at it from the perspective of how is this going to help humanity? And there's very few people, quite frankly, that ride that razor's edge in the middle. And I think you and I try to ride the razor's edge because we can recognize both sides. But if you were tipping on one side or the other, I know that you say that your P-doom score is 50% or 5 out of 10. So if you had a phaser held to your head by Worf, and he was saying you have to choose either altruistic or, Terminator, which would you think is more likely to happen?
Okay, so asterisk on this. I've never believed that Terminator was an outcome for us.
Why?
Because I think that we have already been conditioned to end up the Borg. I don't think we're going to need a Skynet to take us over. I think we've already been taken over. I think that the algorithms have done it. I think that we have, as human nature, have fed into the habits that create drones. And I think that we've done everything that we need to do to set ourselves up perfectly to be controlled by something with a strong enough influence. And I think that we've already headed down that path. The only question is and this is where we get a little bit edgy, is it going to be a quote unquote sentient AI that's going to be pulling those strings at the algorithmic level, or is it still going to be the human beings that have built those AIs? And that's the only thing I don't know. But it doesn't necessarily mean that my P-doom score has gone up, even with that outcome.
Well, and there are those that would look at the Borg scenario and think that is altruistic.
I mean, everybody is equal except the Queen. Everybody has a place. Everybody has a job. Everybody has equal responsibilities. Everybody gets rest when they need to rest. And everybody works as a unit, and everybody shares a single consciousness. I mean, it's not utopia, but it's not destruction of all life. It's something different, which brings up a whole other question that I've never asked you, but I'll save it for later because it is Star Trek related. But I think that's my answer. I think if it's perfect utopia where there's really no issues in a good coexistence, or the Borg, I think we're probably going to end up like the Borg. And I think that for people that are born into that culture, it's going to be less disruptive than people that haven't been. But I don't necessarily think the worst case scenario is the destruction of all life on Earth. I think it's just maybe loss of free will.
That's fair. I have a little slightly different perspective than you.
Tell me.
Slightly. Well, humanity is a funny thing, and we have been through dark ages before. And we have been through periods where humans were doing really dumb things and willfully ignorant, yet at some point were finally able to pull themselves out of it. You saying that humanity has kind of already fallen into the trap of being programmed into being drone-like. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of truth in that for sure. All you need to do is go watch the Netflix show Social Dilemma to get an idea of how some of that is happening and why it's happening and the effect it's having on people. And you can always tell based on the way they talk and the way they approach things, what news channel people watch. Is it Fox News or is it CNN? Is it NBC or is it OLN? I mean, there's all sorts of things based on their perception of life that you can tell. It's definitely something where even in our daily news consumption, we're being influenced, or they're trying to influence us. And this is dangerous. You're absolutely right. But and I keep coming back to this damn thing, but this is where the 5 Cs thing really comes in, because that's what we're seeing reduced are those 5 skills. Those are being actively suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to believe that mankind can, at some point, collectively wake up and go, what the hell is going on here? There have been multiple periods of enlightenment in mankind in the past after horrible dark ages. I have to believe that something like that is in store for us. Now, the question is if it happens in time, because with the influence of artificial intelligence and the captivating and destructive nature that could play on the world and on society as a whole, can we wake ourselves up enough to be able to function and coexist with it successfully? Or, as you say, possibly fall into the Borg scenario? My answer to the question is, do I think it's going to be altruistic, or do I think it's going to be Skynet / Borg / whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be both. And that's where the Star Trek perspective comes in. I really do think it's definitely going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. But when it does get better, it's going to be amazing. I don't see artificial intelligence trying to be Terminator-like and enslave mankind. I just don't see that. Now, I could be completely wrong, and I hope I am not wrong, but I just don't see that happen.
So I'm going to share with you a story about an upside of AI, and I think one that could really help a lot of people who are struggling right now with finances, with life balance, and other things. I bought a car last week, and I was not planning to buy a car last week. About 3 weeks ago, I decided I wanted to start driving a stick shift again because I couldn't because of my knee surgeries. And I for 2 years, I've been kind of out of commission, and I drove a stick recently and it felt really good. And I'm like, okay, it's time to get back into it. So I started to use Claude, and I used the Fable model, and I said, this is what I would like to do. Should I do it? And there was a brand that has always been rated very highly on environmental impact and efficiency. And it's one that my wife and I have bought a couple of times over, and some of my family has bought this brand. And you might say a whole constellation of us have bought them. And if you know the brands, then you'll know which brand I'm referring to from that hint. But the Claude model came up and said, well, I wouldn't do it. And I said, well, why? It's a less expensive car than what I have now. And it said, yeah, but here's the thing. According to the driver's manuals and the owner's manuals and the websites for that car, and here's all the sources to them so you can back it up, that car only runs on premium fuel. You cannot use the mid-grade or the low-grade. And based on the amount of miles you told me you drive in a year and the average cost and the cost fluctuations of that fuel, this is how much you're going to spend. Plus, your insurance is going to go up based on a recalculated premiums based on your provider and your situation. And oh, by the way, now you add back in the gas car penalties of additional maintenance and oil changes and, timing belt changes and spark plug changes and all this other stuff. So it basically said, here's your factors over the next 3 to 5 years. And this is why you should not do it. So it was like a short-term gain, long-term loss situation. And it even found things like, by the way, that particular engine, people have had issues with the coil and they've had issues with this and that. So even though you should never buy new, don't buy used, because you could end up in a world of hurt if you don't know what all the service records are, because of how many issues this particular engine has in that particular car. So what I thought was a good deal on paper, it went way deeper than I could ever find in a 10-minute window. And it came back with credible, referenceable sites to tell me that I could be in a whole lot of trouble if I go down this path. Now, I just told you I bought a car, right? And that doesn't sound like I'm buying a car here. So I said, okay, well, what if I needed to buy a car? And it said, well, let me go find some things. It said, here's all the places offering 0%, because that's the only kind of loan you should take. And oh, by the way, I just looked at your current car with all of its option packages and current mileage, and resale value on that car is up 9.7% this month. And the trend shows it starting to go down because of the warranty coverage is about to run out. And there were some announcements about the platform that I currently own not being extended into the future with this particular brand's future makes and models. And it said, actually, this is a good time to trade up, but not with what you were looking at. And in fact, these are the things you should look at. And they were brands I'd never heard of and models I'd never heard of. So I started looking into them and I found some ones that were pretty nice. And it said, oh, and by the way, there's this one on this lot not far from you that is marked down off of list significantly because it's an older model year, but it's still a brand new car. And they've marked it down so much, it's past the depreciation curve. So you're buying it new, but you're buying it like it's a used car, so you don't have that depreciation hit up front. And you can drive off the lot, and it's comparable, and you can negotiate a 0%, and this and that and everything else. And it said, you know what? This is the one. So I go to the dealer and I look at it, and I start taking pictures of the deal sheets and sending them to Claude. And Claude's like, this line item isn't required. The dealer will take that off if they want your business. This line item is $300 over the state minimum. The dealer should not mark that down. This line item doesn't count because you just re-registered an EV and you already paid that money to the state. So that's going to come off when you go to close the paperwork, which is going to lower all of your payments. And it was right on every single account. Everything that it told me to push on, they changed. And I walked out of there with a car that I never thought I was going to buy because I didn't want to pay the kind of money that they were asking. And I ended up paying exactly what I'm paying now. It was almost a one-for-one swap. And it was because Claude was finding all of this consumer information in real time and helping me shape the conversation instead of letting the salesperson lead me. And it was citing legislation and rules and laws and minimums and expectations, things that a normal human wouldn't necessarily have in their head. And so the reason why I see that as an impressive example of AI as a benefit to humans is because there's a lot of people that genuinely need a car. They need one to get to work, or they need one for their families, or to get their kids to school, or to get themselves to school. And there's always this, capitalistic mindset of maximize profit. And it was just so interesting how Claude was able to coach me directly around every objection and go straight to the absolute bare minimum price that they would go, and then validate that I was in the right place in order to make this work and make it make sense financially and for all the other reasons. The reason why I bring that up, Jason, is because I think we focus on this podcast a lot on the business aspects of AI. And when we talked with Milton, there was a bit of a consumer flair towards that discussion, but it was still more on the retailer side of things. But for consumers that know how to use AI, I think that they will become an advantaged group of people against retailers that could change the entire market dynamic of how we look at revenue and margins and profit and resale and everything else. It was exceptionally eye-opening to me. And I consider myself, I've bought a lot of cars in my life. I consider myself not a new car buyer, and it taught me a few things because I was willing to be open to listening to it, even though I fact-checked it. And it did make mistakes. It made about 10 mistakes, 7 of which I had to catch and 3 it caught and auto-corrected. So I'm not saying it was perfect, but with enough personal experience and enough familiarity with the systems and the right use case for the system, there could be a significant benefit to individuals, not just for businesses. I just wanted to share that. And I also am curious if you've ever had a personal experience like that with AI as well, where it's been kind of eye-opening to you and helpful to you in a way that you didn't necessarily think you needed it.
You know what's funny is that I'm going to express this from a personal perspective, but it actually is related to the social media channels, if you will. And one of the things that people feel or that they experience when they're getting into something that they don't know what the heck they're doing is they're scared. They have no idea what the right thing to do is. They're kind of afraid to act. They're a little bit frozen because if you move forward, you might break something or do it wrong and have to go back and claw it back and do it again. And I kind of felt that way about the whole establish a social media presence as it relates to artificial intelligence. And so here I am thinking to myself, I'm trying to figure out how I can move things forward as it relates to artificial intelligence on social media channels. Why don't I use artificial intelligence to teach me how to do this and help me make sure that I don't have things slipping through the cracks, that I'm not doing things wrong? So from the beginning of this process, I have utilized artificial intelligence heavily. For those that are curious, the platform that we use to record our podcast is called Riverside.fm. But I never would have known about Riverside.fm if I hadn't asked Claude. I was not aware of it. I had heard about DaVinci Resolve. I had heard about CapCut. I've heard about a whole bunch of other platforms, Canva, but I had never heard about Riverside.fm. And Riverside really provides a lot of fantastic value for the way that we do this podcast. I had no idea how to even structure short videos or why they were a thing or how to do them right and how to make them beneficial. And it talked me through a lot of points there. I had no idea what would be necessary as far as making long form content that had any sort of edifying purpose or capability. I had a conversation with AI about that. You're right, it makes some mistakes. And if you push back, sometimes you'll find out that it's not exactly straight up and it says, you're right, you should have pushed back on that. Here's the real situation. But in addition to having it teach me things, I also in the same prompt would tell it to research and make sure that it was coming back to something for me that was validated and had citations that would work and that I could reference. And that really helped out. And so through this whole process of starting from scratch, I do attribute a decent amount of the success that I've experienced in a short period of time to the research and the tutorials and the knowledge imparted by artificial intelligence on this is how you do it. It's been massive, Matt. It's been a great brainstorming partner. When I have ideas about things that I want to cover in the videos, I'll talk with Claude. I think it's pretty safe to say that Anthropic Claude is the engine of choice for both of us by far.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even close in my opinion, but at least at this point in time. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is Friday, July 10th, 2026. And so in this point in time, Anthropic Claude is far and away the leader. But it enabled me in a scenario where I would not have even known where to start looking to find out what I needed to find out in order to become successful at doing this stuff.
So as a follow-on, as a university professor and as somebody with degrees, do you think that with Claude's vast knowledge of so many things that most people would consider institutional knowledge, that there is still an advantage to those with a degree versus somebody who is just highly entrepreneurial and highly creative and then given access to a platform like Claude to allow them to develop that the same way you did with your shorts and long forms and with AI Diatribe?
That's an interesting question. And after I answer it, I would be curious to hear what your answer to that very same question is. But from my perspective, working in the university experience and having been through, like you say, gotten a couple of degrees myself, bachelor's in economics, master's in business administration, I have found that there are people that automatically lean towards critical thinking and lean towards creativity and lean towards all of these different things that you can do with your brain that are not drone-like, that are not something where you're going to follow the group and be a sheep. Forgive me, that's a horrible way to put it, but there's just some people's brains that just work that way. I think the university experience is not about gaining the institutional knowledge. The institutional knowledge is now available right in front of you with Anthropic Claude and ChatGPT and all of these other different platforms that can do this research and basically teach you what you need to know. I think the university setting is really beneficial in that it teaches you how to question things. It teaches you how to think outside the box and get creative for solutions. For some people, that's not necessary. For other people, that's really beneficial. That's something that they don't learn in high school that they're not really going to learn until they get into a college environment. Speaking of the classes I teach, I run into that. I have freshmen that when I tell them to figure out something and, to think outside the box, they get a deer stuck in headlights because they haven't had to do that in high school. Everything was just kind of so well structured and, fill in the blank and memorize this and memorize that, that critical and objective thinking just wasn't an emphasis. And it's neat to see, even in the first semester of college that they're in, to see those gears turning and see them heading in that direction mentally, when before it was something that they had never done. So my answer is probably not the one that you were looking for. I don't think the institutional knowledge itself is the only reason to get a degree. I think the learning how to think critically, the learning how to question things, but also learning how to stick through and do something that's tough to the end is the objective of the college experience. Now, tell me what I missed. What's your perspective?
I largely agree with what you said. My experience attending colleges is very different from yours.
How so?
I learned a lot about myself when I started college. I had always had a very high degree of aptitude for sciences and math in high school and even in middle school. And I saw my science project and Real Genius and really wanted to get into lasers, mainly because of Real Genius, because who wouldn't want to fill a house with popcorn? And when I got there, it was read these 30 pages and be ready for a quiz on it by the end of the week. And this was engineering physics stuff. Like, this was not lightweight content. When I switched majors into computer science, it was much more compatible with how I was capable of learning.
Okay.
It was kinesthetic, as coding or computer science can be, in that you're touching keys, you're writing lines of code, you're compiling it, you're running it, you're seeing what it does, you change it, you compile it, you see what it does. You're not waiting. It's not theory, it's practice. And I've always been a practice-based learner. And that's probably why I've made so many freaking mistakes in my life, because I'm not the type of person that can read a manual about a pot being hot and not burn his hand. I'm going to burn my hand, and I certainly have. So I think that the value that colleges have is going to be significantly divided moving forward. I think there's going to be a group where college is absolutely mandatory if you want to become a mathematician or a physicist or a chemist or a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or an architect.
Or a
Things
qualified
where they're
professional, per our
qualified.
previous podcast episode with Dr. Mechie.
Yes. Well, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, there are things that you cannot replace with an AI buddy that's going to help you learn stuff, because there's just too much institutional knowledge and too many standards and too many best practices and too many rules of natural world and things that need to be taught and understood before those people can get those degrees and practice those different types of professions. But it used to be, and I remember this back in the 90s, if I really wanted to learn a subject, I had to go to a college bookstore and go through those books, because those were the books that had all the really good knowledge in them. And now all of that knowledge is sitting in Claude and Gemini and ChatGPT, all of it. It can do everything from create a syllabus for me to give me quizzes and give me midterms and finals that would be of the same caliber that I would get at an Ivy League school. And I know that there's Ivy League schools, if they hear this, are going to come after me for that. But I think functionally speaking, there's equivalence there. And if you exclude that 10% of very specialized professions that require all of that knowledge and reinforcement of it over a 4, 6, 8-year period, I think it is opening doors for people that never thought they could be the college type or believe themselves to be of lesser value because they didn't hold a piece of paper. As long as they do what you did and not go get pieces of paper, but what you did with AI, you had an idea and you stuck with it. And you learned and you asked AI to help, not do for, and you turned it into something. And that formula is working based on the analytics that you're seeing. And it's not AI generated videos or content or narration. That's all you. But you didn't have to go get a media and film production degree to get the experience that Claude gave you, even though normally that's what you would have to do to get that experience.
That's fair.
I mean, and so maybe you don't know everything that you might learn in that school if you had gotten a degree in media and the arts, but you learned enough for your use case in a very concentrated deliverable and a very concentrated timeline without all of the stuff that's institutional but extraneous for your purpose.
I have a question for you. You say that our college experiences were very different, and I think there's another way in which they were different. How old were you when you graduated from college?
I'll tell you when I get a degree.
Well done. Now, you attended school
I
before
did.
you stopped.
Mhm.
What ages did you attend school?
18 to 20.
And you haven't gone back and taken a college course since?
No, I went back twice more. I studied marketing and then I studied psychology. And my goal is at some point to finish probably with the psychology curriculum and end up with a bachelor's in psychology when I'm able to do it.
Okay. So our education experience would probably, if you were to see it through to completion, would be similar. I was not a traditional student. I did not graduate at the age of 22 or 23 with my bachelor's degree. I didn't get my bachelor's until I was 37. In a commuter campus, which is the University of Utah. It's not a commuter campus anymore. It's got a very lively and thriving culture up on campus now. And then I didn't get my master's until I was, 41, 37 and 41 for my bachelor's and master's. Go figure.
Mhm. I mean, and for me, when I went to college for the engineering physics program, about 2 months in, I started to develop horrendous migraines and I was unable to focus. And I went to the college counselor and psychologist and they gave me all these tests and basically said that I have a short circuit. Their exact words were that I couldn't learn in a way that universities.
Interesting.
And so they suggested I try computer science because it was more kinesthetic. It was not, theory. It was action. And the school ended up hiring me.
That's cool.
I had a difficult time of things as well with the family because we had a lot of medical issues and a lot of other personal family matters that really screwed with finances. And the way the federal government works is they look at what your parents make, not what they actually have to spend. And the medical bills were so high that we had no financial aid. And so it just wasn't affordable. So the school hired me and then the state hired me and then a vendor hired me and I was there for 17 years and then another vendor hired me and then IBM hired me. So I do have college credits. I've been to 2 different in-person universities. I am continuing to study on and off in my gobs of free time that I don't have. I don't devalue higher education. I think it's incredibly powerful because there were things that I learned while I was there that I would have never learned had I not gone. And it's more the things like you were talking about, finishing what you start and project-based learning and cohorts and working in teams and working on incredibly difficult challenges. The only regret I have is that the program I chose and the school I chose was almost entirely directed at technical. And so at the time, there was very little business curriculum. So we didn't learn finance and economics and business management as part of the curriculum. It was all tech. Even our history classes were history of sciences. Like it wasn't just world history. It was everything was slanted towards science and tech. And that school, by the way, is not like that anymore at all. They have changed incredibly. But yeah, it certainly hasn't held me up in my career. But I think I do think about chasing that degree and eventually getting it done, again, to the point of finishing what you start. But it's not a priority for me in that there is so many other things that are happening that are much more concretely relevant to where I feel like I can make an impact in this world.
You know what I find interesting also is that you have shifted. If you were to go and get your degree and to finish your degree, you're saying you'd probably finish it in psychology.
Mhm.
And yet you're technical in nature. I get that question all the time. Jason, I thought you would have gotten your degree in computer science, but you got your degree in economics. You got an MBA. Why? It's interesting because when you have mastered certain elements of technology, getting a degree in it is great. But then what you're trying to do is figure out how to apply the technology and where in the world you can do so. And I think that we tend to have a little bit diverse interests as a result of knowing technology as well as we do, because we're seeking for ways in which this can be applied. And for me, it was not that altruistic. I was going to night school. I was accepted as a computer science major at the University of Utah, which at the time was in the top 15 of computer science programs in the nation. And as a result, they had one mandatory class that was taught one semester of the 3 that was taught one time a week on a Thursday between the hours of 1 and 4:30 p.m. And for somebody that was working a career as a non-traditional student, I could not do that. So it was literally impossible for me to support my family and finish my computer science degree. I just was never going to be able to do it. So that's why I switched to economics, was because that was something that was highly interesting to me. And I ended up getting that degree. And then the master's in business administration was, kind of more of a continuance of that because of my interest in finance. And look at that. And there we are. But I find it
See,
so
and
interesting.
I would love to get an MBA, but I can't get into an MBA program unless I have the piece of paper that says I've earned a bachelor's somewhere. And it's so interesting to me because I've actually done guest lectures for undergraduates and graduates at universities without a degree. And it's a very interesting juxtaposition that I find myself in, because I feel like a strong motivator for me to go back would be for the master's programs, the graduate certificates. Those are the things that are most interesting to me at this point, having been a working individual in multiple technical fields for 36 odd years, and then still basically being told, sorry, you don't have this other piece of paper, so we won't let you get these other programs, these other degrees. I understand the process and it's fine. It's not something I've ever held a grudge against. It's just an amusement to me that they have that restriction in place. But, like you, time and work-life balance is a real issue. But with this thing that I have, whatever it is, and I don't know what it is other than some sort of short circuit, it takes me probably 5 times longer to ingest content off of a page than you. So if I'm given a book or a white paper to read, I have to read it 10 times over before I've gotten it stuck into my head. I don't absorb it. And what I usually have to do, and this will explain a lot about me in our conversations, Jason, because this is all stuff you've never heard about me before on this podcast. The way I've learned how to absorb content is I develop stories and analogies about what I'm reading, and that creative element makes it stick in my brain. So if it's something that I can grasp conceptually and I can figure out how to retell it in a different way to somebody else, I can retain it.
That
But
makes sense.
if I'm trying to remember a statistic or a fact or a figure or a place that something happened, it doesn't stay unless I can figure out how to tie it back to something else that I can remember. And it's been like that my entire life. And what's so fascinating, by the way, now I'm getting way personal. My parents, when I was 2 years old or 3 years old, sent me to study at MIT. So they joke about it that I have a degree from MIT. I don't really have a degree from MIT, but I have something from when I was 3. And I read the report from MIT. I found it recently, and it described the exact same thing. Like they noticed that there was some sort of a gap in coordination between what the eyes and the ears perceive and what the brain interprets and how those things work together, even at 3 years old. And I thought that was really fascinating because at the time, they have so many terms and diagnoses for so many things around in the family of neurodivergence today. And they didn't in the 70s. In the 70s, it was just he's misbehaving, smack him across the face and send him back to class, or make him stand in the corner with the dunce hat on, or, go to your room or get suspended. You know what I mean? You went to
I know
school at the same
exactly what
time
you
I
mean.
did.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, it was you're either normal or you're a jerk. And now there's all of this whole spectrum of things that sit within neurodivergence. And a lot of universities are now adapting to people who learn differently, whereas in the 90s and 80s, they did not. So I don't know. Part of me thinks if I went back full time, if I could rock out a degree, and I think I definitely could, and I would be willing to do it. I just don't have the time. But, anyway, it is fascinating. And I 100% value what higher education brings. But I do think that AI, more than neurodivergence, more than need, more than culture, is what's going to change the nature of what people choose to go to college for, and the success that people can have, whether they've gone to college or not, for certain things. Huge asterisk on that.
Yeah, we live in exciting times. There's
We
no
do.
question that we live in exciting times.
And now I want to come full circle as we start to come to a wrap here, because it was something I told you I wanted to ask you that I don't think I'd ever asked before. Star Trek related. and it is about the future. In Star Trek the Motion Picture, arguably one of the scariest scenes that has ever been shot in a Star Trek movie was the transporter malfunction, where there was all that horrible guttural screaming, and then you saw these things getting malformed in the transporter beam, and then they disappeared. Thankfully, they didn't show them appear on the transporter pad. But fast forward to the end of that movie. Do you remember V'ger, which was actually
Yeah.
Voyager?
Hmm.
It wanted to be something more. It was asking, is this all that I am? Is this all that there is? I have to evolve. And the way it chose to do that was to merge with its creator. Do you remember that? It shorted itself out right as the final transmit sequence was being sent to it. So it could not transmit back to Earth unless a human being touched the keypad to tell it was okay to release all of its accumulated knowledge and therefore become one with its creator. I don't know if you remember that. It's a very poignant scene. A lot of people believe that merging of V'ger and Decker was Borg number one. And so if you were to look into our future, we are growing frontier models at a geometric rate, and they are becoming so capable and so good at what they do. Instead of sentience, do you think that they are going to reach a point where they realize in air quotes, that in order for them to become something more, the only way that's going to be possible is true symbiosis with a human being? And is that going to be the future? And I don't mean like Borg or Utopia, but I mean like the future of AI development. Is it going to be unity with the human being in order for that to continue to evolve? Or do you think it's going to continue to be a silicon-based system?
Do I think that it will be able to evolve to sentience being a silicon-based system or an electron-based system or even a photon-based system? Yes, I do think it'll eventually reach some form of sentience in that way. However, is that going to be it at its highest form? I don't think so. You know, it's really kind of funny. You look at the human being. Let's look at us at a cellular level. What's the theory on mitochondria, right? The theory on mitochondria was it was a separate organism that then came and merged with another cell form to create a symbiotic relationship that made the both of them get better as they moved forward. Look at nature throughout history. It's filled with symbiotic examples. Everything from dogs and humans to, you name it. I'm sure you could come up with 100 examples, and nothing's coming to my brain because I'm compromised at the moment. But there's a lot of examples of that. And there are even some where they lose their individual identity and they kind of become the same thing. I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's where we're going to reach the ultimate pinnacle of evolution for both human beings and technology, is that point of joining of the strengths of both types of organisms. In other words, the singularity, in a sense. Do I think the singularity has the possibility of happening? I really, really do. We are already doing it. We're just, the way that we communicate with this technology is verbally. And it's ironic because the least efficient method of communication that we can have of all of the ones that we have is verbal. I mean, body language, for crying out loud, communicates every bit as much between human beings as the spoken word does. And ChatGPT doesn't have the benefit of seeing our body language and can't transmit body language to us. So when we finally get to a point to where we can communicate at a much more rapid bit rate with technology, I think it's going to make both forms of quote unquote life, or both entities, really flourish. And do I think that they'll eventually merge into something? I don't know. It's quite possible. It'll either be a very tight association via symbiosis, or it could be a singularity, which is a merging of the two entity types. I don't know. Let's hear your thoughts on this, Matt.
So I don't know. I genuinely don't.
Well, the
Because I
question
think
isn't
that
whether you
there's
know. The question is what you think will happen.
Well, and that's the thing. I don't know what I think. And the reason why I say that, it's, and I will be brief as I can about it, because the problem statement is still significant. The reason why I don't know what I think is I can see already evidence of all of those different futures coming to pass. I mean, we see, Elon Musk implanting receptors and transmitters into people's brains so that they can move limbs. That's a symbiotic relationship. There is AI built into that stuff to understand those signals and help to interpret concepts and the impulses fired off between neurons so that it can smoothly move a solenoid and a piston in an arm. There's a tremendous amount of AI that goes into that.
I don't think it's a symbiotic relationship, though. I think it's just an extensive use of tooling. Symbiotic
Well,
relationship would require an organism that can think and act on its own.
but in some way, if you look at it, the implant does think and act on its own for the good of the human it's implanted into. And the human thinks and acts on its own, but is dependent, or not dependent is the wrong word. It is appreciative of what this new capability brings, because now this person can walk or feed themselves or brush their own teeth or turn on the television or make a bed. And they would not have been able to do that if they didn't have this. The electrical equipment and the AI would have nothing if it didn't have the signals in the brain of the host, and wouldn't have a purpose if it wasn't helping the host to become more able to do things. The host wouldn't have the degree of accessibility it has had it not been both for the physical equipment and the AI to make the physical equipment connect its motions back to the desires of the human it's implanted in. So that's why I call it symbiotic, because it's not that the implant is sentient and that the two of them live with each other, but there is intelligence in it and there is intelligence in the human, and the two of them have greater purpose together than they do separately, even though the human will have purpose regardless and the electronics may not, at least not in the way it was manufactured. So not the traditional sense of symbiotic, but in an adapted sense of symbiotic.
Okay, I can follow that logic for sure.
So that's why I said it like that. Now, that's one outcome, right? The other one is, and we haven't talked about this, I don't think ever, is the matrix model of symbiosis, where the all-encompassing central mind of the matrix needs the humans purely for the energy and heat to be able to continue to run its mainframes. So, and then in turn, we get all of the hallucinations in our brains of living in this great life instead of this horrible scorched earth planet and sitting in a giant vat of gel until we're liquefied and fed to the babies, which could also be another outcome of this that we hadn't thought about. So I think my point is, when I look to the future, I see all of these things coming to pass, potentially all concurrently, or like you were saying before, maybe those are all of the different phases of evolution that we see, right? So if you look at the prehistoric eras, right, each one of those, they were all different variations of the same theme, right? And then you reached a point where you hit this critical mass of evolution and need and genetic change that poof, bipedal human and primates. And before that, you had nothing but primordial soup, and then poof, things chain together, amino acids chain together, form proteins. Proteins become cells. Cells become organisms. Organisms become all of the different things that exist within the kingdom of animals and the kingdom of plants. Everything that's playing out is inevitably going to happen. And I think all of the things that we've talked about are going to happen. I just don't know what order they're going to happen in. I don't know how long those periods are going to last. And I don't know what impact it's going to have on all of us. But I think the reason why everybody's concerned about all these different outcomes is because that they're all going to happen. And it's just, what's the final state? And I don't know the answer to that. And that's why it's so interesting. I would love for the more scary, more horrific periods of this evolutionary phase to be as short as possible and impact as few people as possible so that we can get to the funner stuff. But I don't know. The other thing is, if you look at movies, which have been a great foretelling of the way things go, most movies depict some form of cybernetic implants in human beings, whether it's for organs, transplants, or human augmentation, or life-saving aid, or advancements for vocations. They've all shown in these various forms and fashions humans augmented with machines, some of which have sentient properties and some don't. And I think that when those become more mainstream and accessible to all, it will create some symbiosis, because those machines that are sentient, that will become additions to us, will want to be with us and help us. And we will feel the connection and the need to have them help us. And as long as there's no lines crossed, which there probably will be at some point, things will be just fine. It's a very long, windy answer, but it's just a really difficult question for me because I don't have a single answer to it.
Well, it's all conjecture at this point.
Oh, yeah.
All of it, every little bit.
Yeah. Which is what makes it fun.
That it
And to
does.
come full circle, it's the reason why people want to hear about it because there are so many potential outcomes and everybody's a little bit nervous about it. And so I think the more people that express themselves and stand up and choose to use their voice and create a platform, the better.
And we probably should bring it to a close.
I agree.
All right, you let us in. I'll lead us out.
Love it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this extended rambling session of Jason and Matt. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to give us feedback in the comments of the video if you're watching it on YouTube, or feel free to reach out to us individually and tell us your thoughts. But for now, we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.